right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's call. This is Filecoin Core Devs number 46. Today is Thursday, June 30th, 2022, and this is meeting 1 of 2. Today, as always, we're going to go through our sort of typical updates from the implementation teams, get quick updates from the Filecoin Foundation also, and then touch base briefly about the pending V16 network upgrade, as well as the forthcoming V17 network upgrade, which we're all still eagerly kind of planning around. Then at the end, and for I think most of this meeting today, we're going to have Vic and some other folks from the Crypto Econ Lab team discuss a new FIP that was recently added to the repo, which concerns increasing or providing an additional multiplier for longer sector durations upon sealing. So with that, we can jump in and get started. Quick turnaround this week, so I don't have your updates yet, but does someone from the Forest team want to sort of walk us through what you've been working on?
Yes. So the Forest team has been mostly working on getting Forest back into shape after we spent nearly 2 months working on testing. So we have removed a significant amount of code that has moved into the FVM and moved into FVM related crates. So it feels very great from the Forest perspective not to have to carry the burden of all this code that is now shared in the community. And then we are moving forward with making Forest easier to use, and we will soon make a new release. And that's all for the Forest team.
Sounds good. Any questions, concerns, or items for discussion for the Forest team? All right, Lotus team.
Yeah, kind of what we shared async. Obviously, we shipped our 1.16 release, which supports NV16. Because we've been getting a lot of questions/confusion about this, our release is not 1.16 just because it's a network 16 upgrade. That is actually just a complete coincidence this time. So do not expect that to keep happening. We have a whole release philosophy doc that you can read, which explains, but in this case, it was just coincidence. Yeah, the other thing we're excited to share is that we kind of, now that the FVM M1 sprint is slightly wrapping up, we were thinking about what we're going to be focusing in the second half of the year. So laid out our H2 roadmap. Right now, Q3 is more set in stone than Q4 because things will evolve. But our key priorities that we're working on are supporting any FIPS that will be going into V17 and the M2 upgrades. A bunch of improvements to the Lotus miner just to continue to improve the sealing pipeline scalability and meet Filecoin's goals of being able to rapidly onboard large volumes of useful data. And the split store feature, which I think we'll do a deep dive on sometime in July in this call, if that's okay. But high level, it brings us a bunch of performance improvements and achieves online garbage collection, which is one of the most requested things from the partners that we work with. So yeah, exciting times in Lotus. We're excited for the second half of the year after taking a little bit of a break post M1 to decompress.
Yeah. To add on to that, we are also shipping Lotus V117.0, which is our June release. Turns out to be a big release because we are fixing a lot of tech debt and bugs in the indexer provider from the market side of the things. So the community should be please looking forward to that, and the indexer provider bug should be backported to Venus as well, as I know they are already supporting that too. Happy to point out a PR once needed. The other thing, I'm just doing updates for other teams, but Boost has launched officially V1.0.0, their first stable release last week, I believe. That also marks they are shipping the market protocol V2. I'm sure that they are working on FRC to standardize that for all the as a reference market protocol for the Filecoin network. But take a look if you're supporting market in the ecosystem. And also they shipped V1.1.0, which supports the network V16 upgrade as well, and is compatible with Lotus V160. That's just a little FYI for the people that are listening to this call.
Thanks, Jennifer. And on the FRC thing for Boost, yeah, I think I saw you also had provided feedback to Brenda about that actual draft that's going to be pushed. But we do now have space in the FIPS repo on GitHub for those Filecoin requests for comments, those standardization docs. There's currently only one there, so it's FRC 38, I believe, which is the index or advertisement protocol that had been presented a couple of core devs calls back, and then Boost is going to be the second one. So any like specs or other documentation will be found there, just like for any other FIP. But again, it's not like mandatory, as everyone knows. So yeah, all right. Any questions for the Lotus team? All right. And so for the Venus team today, updates are pretty consistent with weeks past. They're continuing to really like focus on updating the Venus chain service to support V16. Some ongoing feature enhancements as always, but no concerns about joining mainnet on July 6th. Stephen had also flagged that there had been an API change that hadn't been properly documented. So we'll follow up with him and make sure that it's in the release notes going forward. But other than that, nothing out of the ordinary. Does anyone have any questions you'd like me to relay to the Venus team this afternoon? All right. So from the Filecoin Foundation, nothing huge to flag here. We have the same number of accepted FIPS, so this is great. Obviously, we're moving towards implementation during V16, so this will condense relatively soon. We have a couple of new drafts that have been pushed into the repo. So as always, do take a look at those. And if you need an overview, again, every week there is a governance update that is shared in the FIPS channel on Slack. So you can see sort of a summary of all new issues and discussions there. And we also, again, have new folders for those FRCs. So the repo is fully up to date. You can see them in the README docs and the table of all the FIPS and now FRC documents, so they should be easy to find. And again, as we look to sort of change up the core devs meeting template, going to find new ways to present this information so that it's a little bit more accessible to you during these calls. But that being said, I don't think Parth is on the call today, but he's continuing to work on bug bounties, and there are no critical security issues to alert everyone to. Any questions? Okay. So for Network V16, everything should be on track, and I feel like teams know very much what each other is doing, so we should be good to go. Ayush, I did want to give you a chance to kind of chat here a little bit about the war room proposal that you had made on the agenda.
Yeah.
You want to discuss this? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So war room is a very dramatic term. Jennifer doesn't like it. So generally when network upgrades happen, obviously we, at least like the Lotus team gets together in a virtual Zoom room to watch the upgrade happen. And you know, and then perform a bunch of like small sanity checks. Our storage providers still submitting their posts. Is the power fine? Did the chain halt? All these obvious things to check. Usually it just winds up being 30 minutes of us kind of taking deep breaths and being like, okay, everything looks good, and then we drop out. But if something does go wrong, then it's also useful to have everyone online to quickly troubleshoot. And we generally split up into smaller groups. So like if it looks like a VM thing, the VM folks can go and investigate and so on. And so we'll be doing that as always with this upgrade. But I was thinking, given that genuinely there are like multiple different teams that have contributed to this, and so if there is investigation needed, it might be the FEM team that needs to jump into it. It might be folks who are familiar with the actors, in which case the Forest folks have the greatest familiarity. It might be proofs things, because so I thought it would be an idea to essentially extend that room and have a broader group that we're all in the same call for. And if things go wrong, then we can identify the group of people needed more easily, who can then go into their kind of sub room to investigate.
For first team, if we do have this, we are gonna have the room open around like 9 a.m. or 9:30 on next Wednesday EST in the morning. UTC that will be 1 p.m. Yes. So let us know how you feel. Lee, David.
Also, if someone would like to volunteer to organize this, like we can use one of kind of PL's rooms if necessary, but also if we wanted to use like a foundation room for it, that would work as well.
I would love to volunteer to help you organize this.
That's what I like to hear.
That's all right.
Is there interest from the Forest team to do this with us together? Anyone, Forest?
And you're all muted. So.
Sorry, the exact, what was the date you guys mentioned?
The date of the upgrade.
Like
So
which
July
date
the
was
6th, next Wednesday, July the 6th, from 9 to 11 a.m.
Yeah. So that's next week, right? So I think like stuff is going on in Phil Toronto. I think 4th, 5th, and 6th. So I think like it'll be difficult personally for me. But if the rest of the team wants to join, they're more than welcome to, I would say.
Obviously, attendance would be optional. No one is required to be here, and certainly not for the entire time. But yeah.
Yeah, we can async on that one, and I can check with the rest of the people because not everybody is here at the call at the moment.
Cool. And Ayush, I'll reach out after. We can also coordinate async, and I'll help you. We can set up calendar invites, make sure people know that this is happening, and see who we can wrangle to participate in the V16 launch party.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Any other questions or flags to raise about V16 from anyone? All right. Seems like we're chugging along. Then thinking about network V17, as before, sort of understanding and tamping down the scope for this upgrade is still very top of mind. And Jennifer and Alex North in particular have added some really helpful comments in the community discussion post, which is in the TPM repo. As always, this is linked in all of our past meeting notes also, but if you haven't sort of taken a look at this, I highly recommend it. Right now, obviously, this is very up in the air, but before we can even get close to a timeline, we need to figure out which FIPS we are considering including. And right now, there are 5 that seem to be the highest priority. So what I'd like to ask is that after this call, I can send out some documentation with, obviously, there's links here. This will be available in the meeting notes also. But links to all of the drafts, as well as other open FIP documents and discussion posts that could potentially be readied as final FIPs prior to sort of a tentative cutoff date for inclusion in the upgrade. And as discussed before, it would be great if all of the implementation teams could sort of plot that implementation pathway so that we can begin to understand what sort of capacity demands these FIPs are going to have upon your teams. Very important to remember and reiterate that it is technically a core dev decision about what gets included. So if you're looking at something and realize that there are complexities to these things that may not be possible, that is a really important flag to raise. And the earlier you raise it, the better we can sort of plan around it. So happy to have a conversation about any of these now, or if anyone has any particular platform, tool, whatever that they would like notes captured in so that you can provide feedback on what your potential implementation pathway is going to be, that would be helpful too. Otherwise, I will send it to you in a Notion doc that you can write and edit in as well. Any questions, ideas, thoughts? This is the same thing that we had discussed in the last meeting as well. So it shouldn't be totally new. It's just sort of that incremental process to get to a point in which we can confirm the scope more confidently. All right. If not, then look for that documentation. I'll ping it to you later this afternoon, and you can begin to provide some feedback. All right, so sort of flying through today's presentation, but Vic, I'll turn it over to you and your team if you want to lead a conversation about the FIP that you guys have been working on. That would be great.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, good to meet you all. For those I haven't met, I'm Vic. Joined by Tom and Maria from Crypto Econ Lab. The main motivation today is a kickoff discussion on this proposed sector duration extension multiplier. Caitlin, is it okay if I share screen, or is that, can you give me the controls?
Yeah, I for sure can.
Great.
Let's see.
Thank you.
Mhm. There you go.
Great, thanks.
Mhm.
Awesome. So quick kind of overview of the motivation here. Crypto Econ Lab wants to design incentives to align the behavior of network participants with one another, but also with the larger vision of the Filecoin network. We see the possibility of the current economic state of the network requiring some new incentive kind of designs. The reason we have proposed this FIP is therefore twofold. The first is we think there are incentives that are missing that could better align us with the longer term goal of the network. We also think that there are current macroeconomic circumstances at play in which there might be some persistent unfavorable conditions to certain stakeholders, which is why from a macroeconomic perspective, we think that this would be kind of a good idea. The most important thing to consider though is we want this change to be as minimal as possible. We want the smallest change surface to the protocol. And we also want to be very transparent and active about how we make this decision. With that in mind, a couple of weeks ago, we put forth a suggestion for protocol improvement. This was authored by Juan Mali and by Crypto Econ Lab. The idea is we want to introduce a sector duration multiplier. Now, what this might mean is basically the idea is that since longer term deals and storage commitments to the network are more in line with the network goal to store humanity's most useful data, and because SPs take on increased liquidity and operational risks in storing deals and capacity for longer, we want to reward that with a multiple on their QAP. So similar to how PhilPlus introduced a verified deals multiplier, which reward SPs for storing useful data, this FIP would introduce a duration multiplier to reward SPs for committing their resources to the network for longer. We've posted this as a discussion, and then we submitted a PR request in the FIP repo. The most important thing to note is while we have submitted a pull request, we are very much in the draft stage. We really want community feedback, and we really want to iterate on the initial example. The initial kind of example though would be we want to increase the minimum sector duration time to 1 year and increase the maximum sector duration time from 540 days to 5 years. And we would also want to have this kind of linear scaling of consensus power with respect to how long you commit your sectors. These are tunable parameters and they're subject to change based on kind of the feedback we are hearing from the community, and we've already kind of been entering into a fairly robust discussion. But the most important thing is regardless of what we decide, we want to make sure that we have a really, really good consideration of these potential scenarios and an understanding of what these changes will do, and also not make too kind of shocking of a change and introduce things in a way, but still kind of achieve our intended goal of we want to have a more stable economy. We want to have funds locked in a certain way in relation to this, circulating supply and release schedule of fill, and also reward miners fairly for their commitments to the network. So again, just to kind of concluding thoughts from our end is that we are certainly very much in the discussion phase. The Crypto Econ Lab opinion, however, is that the speed of deployment does matter. We don't want to rush things. We want to deploy this in a way that is most in line with what the community wants. Our kind of take is that there is some kind of necessity to do this quicker rather than wait longer given the current network state. But again, that is our view, and that is something that is up for discussion as well. And we are also certainly considering alternatives to the initial proposed model. But the initial kind of proposition is kind of our philosophy on what we think an improvement might look like, and we will always consider, something maybe something that's more easily implementable or something that the community thinks is preferable. With that in mind, we have some questions for you guys. Based on what we've kind of described, and feel free to ask questions. How difficult is something like this to implement, and how would it interact with the existing protocol? And also, I think Caitlin kind of showed us some timelines for network upgrades. Given that we think this is fairly critical, when will we need this kind of community alignment by, and how would you like to spec out? And when do you foresee this actually becoming a change implemented on the protocol? So so I gave you a lot of questions there, and I'm sure you have lots of questions for us. But I'll stop there, and we can continue this discussion based on what you guys think. I can share the present. I see some magnification requests. I can share a screen again.
If you're comfortable sharing also, Vic, if you share access after the meeting to the presentation, I will add it into the main slides also, so that everyone can have a copy afterwards.
Sounds good. I can drop the link in the chat also.
Cool, thanks.
Cool, great.
So from my understanding of having read through your FIP draft, and my general understanding at a high level of certain things, so it seems like this kind of proposal would actually be a pretty light lift in terms of implementing. It would just be a code change. But there is a lot of sort of hesitation from storage providers about this proposal, who are concerned about the scope of what would effectively be a 50x rewards increase, but also that this would largely disincentivize smaller storage providers who don't have the collateral costs necessary to take longer term storage deals. What is sort of your thinking around those concerns?
So the concerns are valid, and we do plan on responding to them. But I think the best way to respond to them is just kind of presenting a set of assumptions for simulating how the protocol might react to this change, and then kind of having a more quantitative analysis as to why or why not those initial kind of gut knee-jerk reactions might be not as bad as people think. We are doing a kind of in the process of simulating and analyzing these potential scenarios, and when we engage in discussion with the community, we plan on leveraging those to provide those kind of answers obviously in a public way, but also very sensitive to when we do release these responses. We want to make sure that we have a fair amount of confidence in what we're saying in our assumptions.
Sure. Do you know when those sort of more quantitative models will be completed or made available?
Yeah, Tom, Maria, feel free to jump in, but I think we would like to actively commit to this discussion over the course of next week, and respond to some of the questions that were raised. But again, feel free to jump in if that's not what we currently think. Yeah.
So then I wonder, so you also asked then about the timeline, right? So, so for the V17 network upgrade, there are more FIP drafts than we will be able to include. And so it's a question really for core devs to sort of negotiate what is the highest priority. I understand that CEL feels like this is high priority, which is great. In order to be included, that would likely mean that you would need to achieve pretty broad consent by the end of July, so that we could successfully complete that last call process. And we can talk offline too a little bit more about the details of that. But I'm wondering what the other implementers, what the Lotus team or what the Forest team think about this proposal. And again, at a high level, where they see sort of motivation to include, not include, what questions they would have to help get them there.
Yeah, so just going through the discussion threads here, and from my understanding of the proposal here, it looks like I think it's a good proposal overall because currently the minimum deal, like, is minimum is 180 and maximum is 540 days, which is what, roughly 2 years kind of. So which basically we're trying to extend it between 1 to 5 years, which I think makes sense. However, I think there's a lot of, not a lot of, but from what I see, there is definitely disagreements and concerns from the storage providers on a few things, which includes, from what I see here, like concerns about small storage providers not being able to have the resources for longer deal term making, and also like maybe certain things about the reward incentivization related to it. Before that can be sorted out, I think it might be difficult to put this FIP into the next NV17. That's my initial thought. Perhaps, we can filter out and come into consensus with these storage providers and probably think about incorporating into the next network upgrade. That's basically my initial overview and thought from what I've understood in the last 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, so if I hear you correctly, the main kind of block here is this consensus, is this alignment with storage providers on their preferences for how they would like something like this implemented, if they would even like something like this implemented. Even if that kind of, let's say that consensus is arrived at over the course of the next coming weeks, do you still see the difficulty in potentially including this in the V17 upgrade? And the reason we asked this is mainly because of the temporal nature of why we think this is fairly important, given the current state of the economic state of the network.
Yeah, so as far as implementation is concerned, I'm probably not the best person to answer that. Considering, that there, I don't remember the list. We do have a few level of FIPs, and I think for NV17, we did mention that we will keep it a little less heavy on the client implementations, because for at least for Forest, we were doing a little catch up after the FPM testing. So we personally on our end, we would like to keep it a little light on the client implementation, but I'm not really sure how heavy this goes into client implementations or not at the moment. Definitely not the best person. Maybe our team can review it and try to give you guys an answer async, unless David, you have any ideas at the moment?
No, I don't really have any comments or ideas.
So I think one of the, perhaps a proactive way forward in this is, as mentioned, for all of the FIPs that are being considered for V17, implementers this go around are going to be asked to design those implementation specs prior to us confirming a scope, so that we do understand what sort of work demands are going to look like on teams. I think my perspective is the governance one. This seems like a lighter lift than some of the other ones we're considering. So inclusion may be quite possible from a capacity perspective. It's more just about understanding sort of what that sort of impact modeling looks like and making sure we're confirmed that this is like a strong technical change with well-intended consequences, and we understand how it will sort of affect existing like business models or other more qualitative efforts in the network. And we could move towards getting these things done. But I think, again, as a starting point, if teams want to, again, take a look at what would be required implementation-wise, just so we understand what additional scope of work we're discussing, that may be the first step towards understanding whether or not implementation teams are comfortable potentially including this.
Great, that sounds good to me. I think it's fairly clear what we want to continue with on our end, which is kind of just further validation from a more rigorous standpoint of the specs of this FIP. And we presented the kind of general idea, but all of this is subject to tunability, function changes, parameter changes, as well as changes dependent on what we hear from people like Nicola, Crypto, and etc. So I think that's very fair. Great.
Great. I think we're good. Any other last questions for Vic and the team? All right. Any other last items? Open discussion related to anything you'd like to bring up? All right, then I think that brings us to the end of today's call. Again, thank you guys for presenting. We had a smaller meeting today, but we'll have a second call this afternoon as well. Hope to see you at. And otherwise, we will make sure that all of this is captured in the documentation and shared with implementation teams as well. And we'll add you to the Phil implementers channel on Slack, so that if you want to see that documentation, you'll be able to as well.
Thanks, Caitlin. Awesome.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you in 2 weeks.